The letter came on a Friday morning, tucked between a grocery coupon and a church newsletter. Lorraine Carter almost didn't open it. She was 77, lived alone in a small brick house on the south side of Augusta, and liked her mornings quiet. A cup of coffee, the hum of gospel radio, her cat purring at her feet. But the envelope had the logo of her health insurance company, Southern Mutual Health. That got her attention. She'd been with them for nearly 15 years, never missed a payment, never filed a late claim. When she tore it open, 3 short lines changed everything. Dear Mrs. Carter, based on a recent review of your risk profile, your monthly premium will increase from $218 to $642 effective next cycle. Certain prescription benefits will be discontinued due to a high-risk non-compliance classification. Lorraine stared at the page. She read it again, slower this time. High risk. She whispered the words out loud, as if tasting something bitter. Now, what in the world does that mean? She called the number printed at the bottom of the letter. After 10 minutes of hold music, a woman finally answered. Southern Mutual Health, this is Rebecca. How can I help you? Yes, baby, Lorraine said, steady but polite. I just got a letter saying I'm being called high-risk non-compliant. I don't know what that means, but I do know my bills are paid and my medicines taken. Rebecca hesitated. Let me check your account, ma'am. More typing. More silence. Okay, she said finally. It looks like our new system recently reassessed your risk profile. Lorraine frowned. Your new what did? Our predictive analytics system, ma'am. It reviews health and behavioral factors to determine coverage tiers. Lorraine leaned back in her chair. You mean a computer decided I'm risky? Rebecca gave a nervous laugh. Not exactly. It's an algorithm. An algo who? Rebecca's tone softened. It's a kind of program that helps us estimate future costs. You were reclassified based on data points. Data points, Lorraine repeated. Honey, I'm a person, not a point. That afternoon, her daughter Alicia stopped by after work. She found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, the letter spread open like bad news. They tripled my premium, Lorraine said quietly, and cut my prescription plan. Said I'm high risk. Alicia took the paper, scanning it. What? You haven't been to the ER in years. That's what I told them. Only time I missed a refill was during the storm last March when the power went out. Alicia's eyebrows knit together. That can't be it. Maybe they know something I don't, Lorraine said, trying to laugh. Maybe they got a magic computer that can see the future. The next day, they went to the insurance office downtown. The waiting area was bright but cold, the kind of place where even the magazines looked tired. After a long wait, a young man in a pressed shirt led them to a cubicle. Mrs. Carter, I understand you're concerned about your new premium, he said politely. The adjustment came from our automated risk review. Alicia leaned forward. What triggered it? He scrolled on his tablet. Let's see. Missed refill, location code for low adherence, and, he paused, living alone. Lorraine blinked. Living alone? That's a risk now? It can indicate reduced support for medication adherence, he said carefully, as if reading from a manual. Alicia's voice rose. So because she's widowed and independent, you're charging her more? The man cleared his throat. The system predicts higher future costs. It's not personal. Lorraine folded her arms. You keep saying that, but my bill sure looks personal. That night, Alicia couldn't stop replaying the phrase, the system predicts. She sat on her mother's porch, watching lightning bugs flicker in the dark. Mama, this isn't a mistake. They've built something that decides who's worth caring for. Lorraine sighed. I guess I didn't pass the test. Alicia shook her head. No, Mama, you just failed their math. The following week, another letter arrived. This one was shorter, colder. Notice of coverage adjustment. Your policy has been updated based on AI Risk Engine v3.4. Future appeals must include human medical documentation contradicting predictive findings. Lorraine dropped the letter on the counter. First they call me risky, now they want me to prove I'm human? Lorraine Carter had lived her whole life by the book, paid her dues, took her medicine, trusted the system. But in the eyes of a new machine built to measure risk, she wasn't a loyal customer anymore. She was a liability. The computer hadn't seen her walking every morning, or helping at her church, or keeping a notebook of every pill she took. It saw data gaps, zip codes, and missed refills and called it proof. That night, as Alicia folded the letter into her purse, she whispered, "If the system can call you high risk for living your life, how many others has it already labeled?" Lorraine didn't answer. She just stared at the window and said softly, "I used to think they looked at my health. Turns out they just looked at my neighborhood." Next, Alicia sets out to understand how the predictive scoring system works and discovers that risk in the insurance world has less to do with sickness and more to do with statistics. Alicia had worked in community outreach for years, helping older adults fill out benefits forms and navigate hospital paperwork. But what she was reading now didn't feel like paperwork. It felt like code. She sat in her mother's living room with her laptop, the insurance letter beside her, and a cup of tea growing cold. The phrase kept circling in her mind like a riddle. AI Risk Engine. When she typed it into a search bar, dozens of links popped up. Articles, patents, investor summaries. One line in a trade publication made her stomach tighten. Insure AI identifies non-compliant members before costly events occur, saving insurers up to 28% annually. She whispered it out loud. Before costly events occur. In other words, before people get sick. The next morning, Alicia called the company again. This time, she asked directly for someone from the analytics department. After being transferred 3 times, a man's voice finally came on the line. "This is Todd in predictive modeling. How can I assist you?" "I'm calling about my mother, Lorraine Carter," she said. "She was reclassified as high-risk non-compliant. I want to know what that means exactly." Todd hesitated. "Well, ma'am, the system uses predictive scoring to estimate future costs based on behavioral data." Behavioral data? Yes, things like refill timeliness, appointment adherence, and lifestyle indicators. It's all anonymized, of course. "Anonymized," she repeated. "Then how did it know to triple her premium?" He cleared his throat. "The model reviews variables like living status, geographic health trends, and medication patterns." Alicia frowned. "You mean zip codes, income, and whether she lives alone?" "I wouldn't put it that way," he said carefully. "But yes, those factors correlate with health outcomes." She could almost hear him shrug through the phone. "It's not discrimination, ma'am. It's data." Alicia's voice turned quiet. "Data doesn't pay bills, Todd. People do." Later that week, she met with a friend from college, Dr. Kelvin Moss, a public health professor who studied algorithmic bias. He poured her coffee and said, "Let me guess, PredictSure flagged her as non-compliant?" Alicia nodded. He chuckled grimly. "That system's been on my radar. It's what happens when math replaces medicine." "How does it actually decide who's non-compliant?" she asked. Kelvin pulled out his tablet. "The algorithm uses a scoring model, 0 to 1. Every patient starts neutral. Mr. Refill, minus 0.1. No record of exercise or wellness activity, minus 0.2. Live in a zip code with lower average health outcomes, minus 0.3. Add it all up, and anything under 0.5 becomes high risk." Alicia stared. "So it's not measuring what people do, it's measuring where they are." "Exactly," he said. It assumes that people who live in certain neighborhoods will have worse outcomes and prices them accordingly. She shook her head. That's just digital redlining. He nodded. They'll never call it that, but yes. It's a computer learning human prejudice from old insurance data. It sees patterns, not people. That afternoon, Alicia printed one of the company's investor slides from the internet. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, "Predictive scoring, optimizing profit, personalizing risk." Underneath was a list of the top 5 risk predictors. 1. Missed prescription refill cycles. 2. Delayed medical visits. 3. Social isolation score. 4. Household income proxy. 5. Zip level adherence trends. Alicia circled social isolation score and whispered, "They charged my mother for being lonely." When she showed it to Lorraine that evening, her mother frowned. "So, because I live by myself and don't go jogging, I'm a liability?" Alicia nodded. "They don't see you. They see a spreadsheet." Lorraine chuckled sadly. "I guess it's cheaper to assume I'll get sick than to believe I've been taking care of myself." Alicia smiled faintly. "Mama, you're in better shape than half the people at my job." Lorraine shrugged. "Doesn't matter. The computer's never seen me walk to church." That night, Alicia wrote an email to PredicSure's media office. She asked 3 questions. How many policyholders were reclassified as high risk since the AI launch? What human oversight existed for appeals? Did zip code or race factor into the scoring model? The reply came 48 hours later, a single paragraph. Our risk engine uses objective, race-neutral data to identify non-compliance patterns. We are proud to deliver fair and accurate assessments through advanced analytics. Alicia stared at the screen. "Fair and accurate," she repeated softly. "That's what they all say." Insurance was once a promise, protection against the unexpected. Now it had become a prediction, one calculated by machines trained on the past. The system didn't see Lorraine's good habits or clean checkups. It saw her zip code, her quiet house, her missed refill, and called it destiny. That night, Lorraine looked at the old letter again. She tapped her finger over the line, "high-risk non-compliant," and said, "I've lived long enough to know one thing. If they're calling me high risk, they must be scared of something. Maybe it's the truth." Next, Alicia digs deeper, uncovering what the AI got wrong and how it quietly punishes the same communities that have always paid the highest price for being different. By the next week, Alicia had gathered a small mountain of papers, printouts, policy letters, and technical documents that barely made sense. She sat at her mother's dining table, highlighter in hand, circling phrases that made her skin crawl. On one page, a column titled "Risk Driver Summary" listed every reason her mother had been flagged. She read them out loud, her voice rising with each line. Missed one prescription refill. Okay, fair enough. Lives alone. What does that have to do with anything? Zip code 3091. What's wrong with that? Low social engagement score? Ugh, give me a break. Lorraine sipped her tea quietly. Low social engagement? I go to church every Sunday. They just don't count the right kind of social. Alicia laughed, shaking her head. Apparently, unless you're logging your walks on a fitness app or posting about yoga, you don't exist. Lorraine smiled. Maybe I should get on TikTok then. Later that afternoon, Alicia called PredicSure's customer helpline again. This time, she didn't want explanations, she wanted facts. After 10 minutes on hold, a voice came on. "This is Jordan from PredicSure Support." "Jordan, I need you to tell me how your system decided my mother's a high-risk non-compliant patient." "I can't access individual profiles," Jordan said cautiously, "but I can explain how the model calculates scores." "Go on," Alicia said. The system combines medical data, pharmacy activity, and socioeconomic indicators to predict adherence risk. If someone's refill history is inconsistent or their neighborhood shows lower average compliance, they might receive a higher score. Alicia's voice hardened. So the system punishes people for living in a poor neighborhood? Jordan hesitated. Not punishes, ma'am. It adjusts for known trends. Trends, Alicia repeated. You mean bias with better branding. That evening, Alicia showed the call transcript to her friend Kelvin, the public health professor. He pointed to a paragraph on one of the slides. Here, this is what's wrong. The model's trained on biased data. It learns who used to get care, not who deserves it. He leaned closer. See this variable, medication gap tolerance. It assumes if someone misses a refill once, they'll keep doing it. It never asks why. Like my mom missing hers because of the storm, Alicia said. Exactly. The system doesn't know about power outages or transportation issues. It just knows she didn't show up in the data. In its logic, missing equals neglect. So it learned that people who can't afford convenience are unreliable, Alicia said. Kelvin nodded. And because it's automated, no one questions it. The machine's bias looks like math, so everyone calls it objective. The next day, Alicia requested her mother's full risk score audit. When the email came through, she stared at the table on the first page. Adherence probability, 0.43. Household risk modifier, plus 0.25. Lives alone. Zip risk modifier, plus 0.18. Region flagged for non-adherence. Data confidence, 91%. Final score, 0.86. High risk. At the bottom, a single note read, auto-classified, non-compliant, premium adjustment approved. Alicia whispered, they called it automatic, but it looks like deliberate. That evening, Lorraine sat quietly by the window, the glow of a streetlight reflecting off her glasses. When I was younger, she said, we used to worry about doctors not listening. Now it's the computers that don't listen. At least a doctor can look you in the eye. Alicia sighed. These systems weren't built to listen, Mama. They were built to sort. Lorraine smiled sadly. And sorting's just a fancy way of separating people, isn't it? Alicia nodded. Yeah, only this time it's happening behind a screen. A few days later, Alicia sent the audit report to Tasha, the journalist who'd covered Marion Hughes's case last year. Tasha replied in minutes. This isn't new, but it's worse than anyone thought. Send me everything. We're running this story. She attached a link to a public health study. The headline read, Predictive Analytics and Insurance, Hidden Costs of Efficiency. Alicia read the first line aloud. Algorithms trained on unequal systems will always recreate inequality, but now at the speed of automation. She looked at her mother. You're not a number, Mama. You're a mirror. Lorraine chuckled. If I'm a mirror, baby, I hope they don't like what they see. The computer wasn't wrong by accident. It was wrong by design. It learned from history, and history had always been unfair. It confused absence with apathy, poverty with irresponsibility, and caution with defiance. It didn't understand that sometimes a missed refill isn't neglect, it's survival. That night, Alicia wrote in her notebook. The computer didn't ask why, it just assumed. And when machines assume, people pay. She underlined the last line twice. Next, Alicia takes her fight beyond customer service, into the boardroom, where company policy meets public pressure, and the meaning of high risk finally gets put on record. By the next week, Alicia had gathered a small mountain of papers, printouts, policy letters, and technical documents that barely made sense. She sat at her mother's dining table, highlighter in hand, circling phrases that made her skin crawl. On one page, a column titled Risk Driver Summary listed every reason her mother had been flagged. She read them out loud, her voice rising with each line. Missed one prescription refill. Okay, fair enough. Lives alone? What does that have to do with anything? Zip code 3091? What's wrong with that? Low social engagement score? Oh, give me a break. Lorraine sipped her tea quietly. Low social? I go to church every Sunday. They just don't count the right kind of social. Alicia laughed, shaking her head. Apparently, unless you're logging your walks on a fitness app or posting about yoga, you don't exist. Lorraine smiled. Maybe I should get on TikTok then. Later that afternoon, Alicia called PredictSure's customer helpline again. This time, she didn't want explanations, she wanted facts. After 10 minutes on hold, a voice came on. This is Jordan from PredictSure Support. Jordan, I need you to tell me how your system decided my mother's a high-risk, non-compliant patient. I can't access individual profiles, Jordan said cautiously, but I can explain how the model calculates scores. Go on, Alicia said. The system combines medical data, pharmacy activity, and socioeconomic indicators to predict adherence risk. If someone's refill history is inconsistent or their neighborhood shows lower average compliance, they might receive a higher score. Alicia's voice hardened. So the system punishes people for living in a poor neighborhood? Jordan hesitated. Not punishes, ma'am. It adjusts for known trends. Trends, Alicia repeated. You mean bias with better branding. That evening, Alicia showed the call transcript to her friend Kelvin, the public health professor. He pointed to a paragraph on one of the slides. Here, this is what's wrong. The model's trained on biased data. It learns who used to get care, not who deserves it. He leaned closer. See this variable? Medication gap tolerance. It assumes if someone misses a refill once, they'll keep doing it. It never asks why. Like my mom missing hers because of the storm, Alicia said. Exactly. The system doesn't know about power outages or transportation issues. It just knows she didn't show up in the data. In its logic, missing equals neglect. So it learned that people who can't afford convenience are unreliable, Alicia said. Calvin nodded. And because it's automated, no one questions it. The machine's bias looks like math, so everyone calls it objective. The next day, Alicia requested her mother's full risk score audit. When the email came through, she stared at the table on the first page. Adherence probability, 0.43. Household risk modifier, plus 0.25, lives alone. Zip risk modifier, plus 0.18, region flagged for non-adherence. Data confidence, 91%. Final score, 0.86, high risk. At the bottom, a single note read, auto-classified, non-compliant, premium adjustment approved. Alicia whispered, they called it automatic, but it looks like deliberate. That evening, Lorraine sat quietly by the window, the glow of a streetlight reflecting off her glasses. When I was younger, she said, we used to worry about doctors not listening. Now it's the computers that don't listen. At least the doctor can look you in the eye. Alicia sighed. These systems weren't built to listen, Mama. They were built to sort. Lorraine smiled sadly. And sorting's just a fancy way of separating people, isn't it? Alicia nodded. Yeah, only this time it's happening behind a screen. A few days later, Alicia sent the audit report to Tasha, the journalist who'd covered Marion Hughes's case last year. Tasha replied in minutes. This isn't new, but it's worse than anyone thought. Send me everything. We're running this story. She attached a link to a public health study. The headline read, Predictive Analytics in Insurance, Hidden Costs of Efficiency. Alicia read the first line aloud. Algorithms trained on unequal systems will always recreate inequality, but now at the speed of automation. She looked at her mother. You're not a number, Mama. You're a mirror. Lorraine chuckled. If I'm a mirror, baby, I hope they don't like what they see. The computer wasn't wrong by accident. It was wrong by design. It learned from history, and history had always been unfair. It confused absence with apathy, poverty with irresponsibility, and caution with defiance. It didn't understand that sometimes a missed refill isn't neglect, it's survival. That night, Alicia wrote in her notebook, "The computer didn't ask why. It just assumed. And when machines assume, people pay." She underlined the last line twice. Next, Alicia takes her fight beyond customer service into the boardroom, where company policy meets public pressure, and the meaning of high risk finally gets put on record. The whistleblower's email came at midnight. Alicia was half asleep on the couch, her laptop still open on the insurance company's website when the message pinged. The subject line read, "For your mother." Inside was a folder of attachments, meeting notes, presentation slides, internal chat logs. At the bottom of the email, just 5 words. They called it cost containment. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen as she spread the pages across the table. Lorraine stood behind her, robe tied tight, coffee steaming in her hand. "What is all that?" "Proof," Alicia said quietly. "Proof they did it on purpose." The first document was titled Insure Implementation Review Q4 Summary. In neat corporate font, it said, "Risk segmentation has reduced claims expenditures by 22% within targeted demographics." Lorraine frowned. Targeted how? Alicia flipped to the next page. By zip code, by refill history, by living alone, by anything that makes you look expensive to help. She turned to another slide. A chart labeled Top 10 Predictors of Noncompliance had bars in bright colors. At the bottom of the list was minority population over 25%, predictive reliability 0.84. Alicia felt her chest tighten. They literally trained the system to distrust certain neighborhoods. Lorraine's hand trembled. And they called that reliable? Further down, a line from a financial memo made her stomach turn. Zip clustering enables efficient claim avoidance in low-return segments. Low-return segments, she read out loud. That's people, Mama. They turned people into bad investments. Lorraine shook her head. They've been doing that for years, baby. The only difference is now the computer does it faster. That afternoon, Alicia drove to Tasha's newsroom carrying the documents in a manila folder. When the journalist opened it, her eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" "A whistleblower from inside the company." Tasha skimmed the first few pages, her face hardening. "This isn't an accident. This is policy." She pointed to a line highlighted in yellow. "Maintain non-demographic language to ensure regulatory safety." Tasha said, "That's corporate code for hide the racism." Alicia nodded. They scrubbed the words, not the bias. The next day, the headline hit the news. Insurance giant used predictive AI to target Black seniors. By noon, the story had spread across networks. TV anchors repeated the same phrase over and over: data-driven discrimination. The company released a bland statement. "Our AI system is race-neutral and designed solely for efficiency." But efficiency, Alicia thought, shouldn't come at the price of fairness. Reporters began reaching out to families across the state. One by one, stories poured in. A man in Memphis. "My mother's blood pressure pill stopped being covered. They said she missed one checkup." A woman in Alabama. "They raised my rate because I share a zip code with folks who can't afford the gym." A retired teacher in Virginia. "I guess we're all just numbers in their calculator." Lorraine watched the coverage with quiet disbelief. "It's like someone finally turned the lights on," she said. Alicia nodded. "And they can't turn them off now." That evening, Southern Mutual CEO appeared on television. He looked calm, confident, rehearsed. "Our company remains committed to fairness and transparency," he said. "Any disparities are unintended and currently under review." Lorraine chuckled. "Unintended, my foot. They've got spreadsheets full of intention." Alicia smirked. "And we've got the receipts." The next morning, Alicia received another anonymous message. It contained a snippet from an internal chat between senior analysts. Analyst 1. Flagged clusters overlapping with historically underserved zips. Analyst 2. Keep those. There are cost control sweet spots. Analyst 3. Make sure wording stays neutral. No red flags for regulators. She stared at the screen in disbelief. "Sweet spots," she muttered. "They called people sweet spots." Lorraine looked at her daughter. "And they wonder why nobody trusts them." By the end of the week, congressional committees announced formal hearings. The term algorithmic redlining entered the national conversation. And for the first time, PredictSure's corporate partners started backing away. Alicia stood outside the Capitol that evening, folder in hand. "Guess we're not done yet," she said. Lorraine smiled proudly. "You know, I used to pray someone would listen. I didn't think it'd take a computer to make them hear." The paper trail didn't just expose bad math. It revealed a quiet belief woven into the code. That risk was something you could assign to a zip code, a budget, or a body. But the real risk wasn't in people like Lorraine. It was in systems that forgot compassion doesn't fit in a spreadsheet. That night, Alicia wrote in her notebook. They said this was about accuracy, but what they really measured was who they thought we were worth protecting. Next, as the hearings begin, the fight moves from the kitchen table to Congress, and the people behind the code finally have to answer for the price of prediction. The hearing room was packed. Cameras clicked, papers rustled, and for once, the people sitting in the back rows weren't lobbyists. They were patients. Dozens of seniors had come from across the country, holding folders stuffed with letters, denial forms, and premium notices. One woman carried a handmade sign, "We're not algorithms." Another, "I'm high risk because I'm alive." When Alicia and Lorraine entered, people nodded to them like old friends. Word had spread fast. The Carters were the faces of the fight. Lorraine smiled politely, but held on to her daughter's arm. "Never thought I'd see my name in a congressional schedule," she whispered. Alicia smiled. "Well, Mama, they should have known better than to put you in the unimportant folder." The first witness was a retired nurse named Gwen Daniels. Her voice trembled as she read from her statement. "I was dropped from my insurance last year because the system said I failed to manage my diabetes. But the truth is, my pharmacy closed during the merger, and no one told me how to transfer my refill. I almost lost my foot waiting for approval." Murmurs rippled through the room. Next was a pastor from Tennessee. "Half my congregation got letters like this," he said, holding up the same white envelope Lorraine had received. "Every one of them lives within the same 4 zip codes." Reporters' pens scratched across their notepads. When it was Lorraine's turn, she stood slowly, adjusted her glasses, and began. "My name is Lorraine Carter," she said. "I've been paying for insurance longer than some of y'all have been alive. I took my medicine, I kept my appointments, I did everything right. But one day, a computer decided I was a problem." The room went still. "They said I was high risk," she continued, "but I wasn't the one gambling. They were, betting that I wouldn't fight back." Alicia watched proudly as her mother's words filled the chamber. Lorraine held up her letter. "This paper right here, it doesn't know me. It doesn't know I teach Bible study, or that I walk 2 miles every morning, or that I keep my sugar steady without missing a dose. It just knows my zip code and calls it destiny." She looked directly at the committee chair. "If they can do this to me, imagine who they're doing it to quietly." Applause broke out, despite the warnings against it. After the hearing, reporters swarmed around them. One microphone pushed forward. "Mrs. Carter, do you think the system was racist?" Lorraine didn't hesitate. "It doesn't have to be racist to act like it. All it has to do is learn from people who were." The quote ran that night on every major network. In the days that followed, the hashtag #HighRiskHumans began trending online. People posted their stories, canceled prescriptions, denied claims, unexplained premium hikes. A man in Detroit wrote, "They called my mom non-compliant for missing a refill when her bus broke down." A woman from Louisiana, "The system said I was high risk because my neighborhood has too many poor outcomes." And one tweet shared thousands of times, "Maybe the problem isn't our risk. Maybe it's theirs." Under public pressure, the government launched a formal investigation into Predictive AI and its partner Insures. The findings were damning. Over 64% of high-risk reclassifications affected patients over 60. 82% of flagged zip codes were predominantly Black or low income. 0 patients had been notified that their scores were based on non-medical factors. The headline the next day read, "Predictive Health or Prejudice? The numbers don't lie." Lorraine watched the news in silence, then turned to her daughter. "You know what's funny? I spent my life being careful, saving receipts, double-checking bills, keeping notes. Never thought I'd have to do the same thing just to prove I deserve care." Alicia squeezed her hand. "You shouldn't have to prove you're worth healing, Mama." Lorraine smiled faintly. "But maybe if enough of us speak up, the next person won't have to." That evening, at a community rally in Atlanta, Alicia stood on stage beside her mother. "Technology is supposed to make life easier," she said into the microphone. "But if it starts deciding who gets help and who doesn't, that's not technology, that's judgment. And we're here to say no." The crowd cheered, signs waved in the air. One read, "Our data, our dignity." The Carter story had become more than a case. It was a movement. The system had called them high risk, but what it really uncovered was its own moral hazard. For every patient it erased, there was now a voice to remind the world that data doesn't define worth. That night, Lorraine sat on her porch, watching the streetlights glow. She opened her old notebook and wrote one last line for the day. They tried to measure risk, but they forgot to measure heart. Next, the country demands accountability. New legislation is drafted, and the companies that hid behind algorithms now have to answer a question no computer can calculate. What is the price of fairness? The hearing stretched on for weeks. Executives testified, regulators argued, and analysts dodged every hard question with phrases like optimization and predictive accuracy. But what everyone remembered wasn't the numbers. It was the faces sitting in the audience. Old faces, tired faces. People who had worked, paid, and trusted, only to be told by a machine that they were too expensive to care for. When the final session opened, Congress introduced a new proposal. They called it the Fair Algorithm Act. Reporters, almost in disbelief, nicknamed it the Carter Clause. The bill had 4 main rules. 1. Every insurance company using AI had to disclose all risk factors that determined a patient's classification. 2. Any denial or premium increase based on an algorithm had to be verified by a human reviewer, a real person who signed their name. 3. Patients had the right to request their risk score and challenge its accuracy. 4. Companies were required to perform bias audits twice a year, publishing the results publicly. As one senator said, if algorithms can change lives, they shouldn't be allowed to hide behind math. When Alicia heard the news, she called her mother immediately. "They named it after us, Mama, the Carter Clause." Lorraine laughed so hard she had to sit down. Well, would you look at that? I went from high risk to headline. Alicia grinned. You earned it. Lorraine smiled. All I did was open my mail. Yeah, Alicia said, but you refused to stay quiet about it. The signing ceremony happened in Washington that fall. It was a bright, crisp morning. The Capitol steps were filled with journalists and supporters holding signs that read, "Accountability is not optional. Algorithms don't get the final word." When the president stepped to the podium, he looked directly at the Carters in the front row. Today, he said, we're not just regulating technology, we're restoring trust, and we're making sure no one is ever deleted from the system for being who they are. He signed the bill with a blue pen, then handed it to Lorraine. "This one's for you," he said softly. Lorraine smiled. "Thank you, sir, but I'm not the only one." Within months, insurance companies across the country began rewriting their policies. AI systems were required to flash a banner every time they flagged a person. Review pending, human verification required. Customer portals added a new button, "See My Risk Score." And next to it, a small line that read, "Remember, your value cannot be calculated." Alicia printed that out and taped it to her mother's fridge. Meanwhile, hospitals and clinics joined the movement. They launched a campaign called Fair Care, People Before Prediction. Training videos showed staff how to challenge automated decisions. Posters in waiting rooms read, "Ask us how your data is used. You have a right to fairness." Lorraine loved that line. "It sounds like something I'd say," she joked. "You kinda did," Alicia replied. "Half their campaign came from your testimony." Lorraine grinned. "Well, I always said if you want to be heard, you better speak plain." One evening, Alicia received an email from the anonymous whistleblower. It was short, like the first one. They changed the model. No more neighborhood scores. No more living alone penalties. They call it the Carter Update. Alicia smiled, tears welling up. "They actually fixed it, Mama." Lorraine nodded. "Good. Maybe now the next woman won't have to fight a computer just to keep her medicine." That weekend, the local paper ran a feature story titled, "The Carters and the Code: How a Mother and Daughter Changed American Insurance." It quoted Lorraine's words from the hearing. They said it wasn't personal, but everything's personal when it's your health. The Carter Clause didn't end discrimination, but it ended its invisibility. For the first time, patients could look inside the black box and see how the system judged them and ask it to explain itself. And the people once labeled high risk, they became the reason the system had to care again. That night, as rain tapped softly on her window, Lorraine opened her old notebook one more time. On the last blank page, she wrote, "They said I was a risk, but I turned out to be a reason." Next, Lorraine returns to her clinic, not to fight, but to teach. Because justice isn't just in the law. It's in the moment a woman like her can walk into a room and know she'll never be deleted again. A year after the law passed, Lorraine Carter sat in the same waiting room where this whole story began. But this time, there was no fear in her chest, just quiet pride. The air smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. A bright poster hung on the wall. "Your health, your history, your right to fairness. The Carter Clause, 2030. Lorraine smiled. "Never thought I'd see my name on a poster that wasn't a church potluck," she said, half to herself. The nurse behind the desk grinned. "You're Mrs. Carter, aren't you? We learned about your case in training. You made a lot of changes happen." Lorraine chuckled. "All I did was open my mail and ask questions." The nurse shook her head. "You asked the right ones." Inside the exam room, Dr. Patel pulled up her record on the screen. For the first time, the chart looked simple. No red flags, no risk tier codes, no confusing jargon. Next to her name, a green line flashed softly. Human verified, Fair Algorithm Act compliant. Everything looks good, Mrs. Carter, the doctor said. Your blood pressure's steady, your sugar's better than mine, and your record's finally accurate. Lorraine smiled. Guess the computer finally believes me. Dr. Patel laughed. It's not about belief anymore, it's about proof. On her way out, Lorraine stopped by the front desk. A young man was helping an older woman fill out a form. Don't worry, Miss Johnson, he said kindly. If the system flags anything, we'll double-check it before it goes through. That's your right now. Lorraine's heart swelled a little. For the first time, she felt like the world had learned its manners again. Later that afternoon, she met Alicia at a small diner by the river. Her daughter was scrolling through her phone, smiling. Mama, they just published a new report. Complaint rates dropped by 40% since the law passed. Lorraine stirred her coffee. 40% ain't perfect, but it's a start. Alicia nodded. It's more than that. Hospitals are building their own fairness teams now. Real people reviewing data decisions. You started something. Lorraine looked out the window, watching sunlight dance on the water. You know what the funny part is? They called me high risk, but the real risk was trusting a system without a conscience. Alicia smiled. Not anymore. You gave it one. That evening, the two of them stopped by the community center where Lorraine now volunteered once a week. A new sign hung outside. The Lorraine Carter Health Empowerment Program, teaching seniors their rights in the digital age. Inside, she stood before a small group of older adults, most of them clutching printed insurance letters. All right now, she said warmly. First rule, don't be afraid to ask questions. Second, keep your own records. And third, never let them tell you your health can be predicted by your zip code. A woman in the back raised her hand. Mrs. Carter, how did you get them to listen? Lorraine smiled. I stopped trying to sound smart, and I started sounding human. That's something no computer can imitate. Laughter rippled through the room. After the session, Alicia handed her mother a small frame wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a photo from the bill signing, the moment the president handed her the pen. Beneath it, Alicia had printed a quote from Lorraine's testimony. Health isn't a forecast, it's a right. Lorraine ran her finger along the glass. You know, I still get bills that say do not reply. Alicia laughed. And? Lorraine grinned. I reply anyway. That night, back home, she sat at her kitchen table, the same spot where she'd first read that terrible letter 2 years earlier. She pulled out her old notebook, now worn at the edges. Flipping past the pages filled with anger and questions, she found the last blank sheet and wrote, They said I was high risk, but all I risked was telling the truth. Fairness takes time, but it remembers names. She closed the notebook gently, exhaled, and smiled. Lorraine Carter didn't set out to change a system. She just refused to disappear inside one. Her fight became proof that fairness doesn't need perfect data. It needs persistence, community, and a voice that won't be quiet. Because fairness isn't automatic. It's protected, preserved, and passed on. The Carter Clause, 2030, because care should never depend on a prediction. If this story spoke to you, share it. Someone you love might still be waiting for fairness. Subscribe to Older Black Person Stories, When Data Meets Dignity, for more true stories about courage, justice, and the people who remind technology to care.